It's not us versus them or me versus you.
So we're not talking about an us versus them mentality. We're going for this versus that.
This versus that.
Yeah, okay.
I think it helps you get along better.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Sometimes
We get along so well, and sometimes you're extreme right, I'm extreme left, I'm liberal, you're a conservative, and yet we get along so well. That's marvelous, wonderful.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
Okay.
Amazing grace.
So today,
Saved a wretch.
like you. So today, what we're going to do.
That's good. Come on, talk to me. Get in that microphone.
What we're going to do is trying to give you a little example of.
An example. Give me an example of
this versus that thing.
Would he have said, come on, Hillary, vote for me, baby?
No. I don't know. I don't know about that.
Once again, we're back here on This Versus That. And yes, this is not my wife.
I'm that.
Without hair.
I'm that substitute.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm an artificial that.
This is our son, Joey, and so we're going to have fun this morning.
Before we get started, can I just tell you how much of a hog you are with desk space?
Yeah.
Is this how you treat my mammy when she's up here?
Right.
Oh. I think I might also know what's wrong with your monitor here. You've got 10,000 tabs open. Your computer doesn't have any memory to display anything on the screen.
A diagnosis. Okay. Now, we want to talk about the topic at some point on the show, and this is probably a very controversial subject, and that is church. I've stated for years that I walked away from church, and I don't think that many people understand that. What I meant by what I've stated over and over again has simply been what people consider to be institutional church in the classical sense. I walked away from that. When did I actually do that? Well, there are various answers inside of my head. It was back in 1982. However, to walk away from something like that is a very difficult thing to do, simply because you build lots and lots of relationships with people within, let's say, that particular modality. And one thing that you don't want to do is to destroy relationship connection. You're hoping that you can keep connected without everything becoming disconnected. But this is the problem. If I remain very much part of the ἐκκλησίαι, that is, that Jesus talked about, he's talking about ἐκκλησίαι in the sense of gathering, for the purposes of social construct. In other words, let's build better models of behavior. Let's build better models of morals. Let's build a better place for today and tomorrow. And let's consider the past and its mistakes and see if we can move forward a bit. And so, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like to some extent you had a plan for your exodus that its inception was in 1982, but for the rest of us at the New Covenant group, it was. I mean, I'm sure it was a step-by-step process for you as well, but I don't think that I fully realized that I was going to be taking a step away from Christianity until the day that I just simply did it. And so I hadn't given much thought to what was beyond that, even though in retrospect it seems like I might have been a better move. But so for me, once I stepped away, it's like, well, what's next? And it took me a while to digest and really process everything that is lost if you literally step away from church. And the biggest hole for me, the thing that I miss the most, is the common consciousness, like the advantage that we had as a group when we were a church is that we all held in awe this grouping of stories. And so many of us would spend a lot of time trying to understand those stories. And that meant that many of us, if I were to say to somebody, if I were to give them an analogy about a story in the Bible, they would know what I was talking about. I would put a picture in their head, and we would be on the
Right.
same page so quickly. And I'm not saying that therefore let's go back to church and all read the Bible, but that's a tremendous loss, and for that's the reason why I watch Naruto with my son. We've got a great new show that we're watching together at the house called Lost in Space, which I'm sure you've heard of. But this is a remake that Netflix has done. It's a fantastic story. And I love these because they have so many lessons that make you feel good, make you feel bad, make you feel scared, make you feel courageous, and to be able to go back and relate to those in important times, I think is
The thing that I wanted to provide, if I could think of myself as providing anything positive, I wanted to take, just individuals who found themselves in church and question why are we here? In other words, church, that is in the classical sense, in the institutional sense, was a commitment to a text. It was a commitment to a narrative. It was a commitment to Jesus. In other words, it was this kind of commitment. It wasn't just a commitment. Let me see if I can frame it better. Maybe it was an obsession. People were obsessed with God. People were
Right.
obsessed with Jesus. You couldn't back away
Yeah.
from Jesus for a moment, or you
very
were
very very
backsliding.
common to take it way too far.
Right. And so every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night, and throughout the week with all the activities, it was all about Jesus. It was all about, the God narrative. It was God talk. And people were looking for accuracy, not in the sense of how accurate are we at playing tennis. They were looking for accuracy in the inerrant sense. People would look to me and say, or ask, which version is the best version of
Right.
God's Word. People would look to me and say, well, if this is
NIV.
okay, if I would, provide a model of translation theory, some people would say, oh, that's it. That's my belief now. And so people were committed to the translation, their understanding, I should say, of whatever I said concerning translation modeling. And that bothered me a lot because people were so committed to the text or the outcome of the text, in what it said,
Right.
as opposed to
Never giving question to whether the original translation had any error, like just some sort of moral error, or maybe the first person who wrote it down had a spelling error or a grammar error.
I remember years ago I was teaching a conference, teaching at a conference, and there was hundreds of pastors there, and I brought up the notion that the Gospels, much of this could have been orally transmitted.
Right, probably
To
was for a while.
suggest, a Q-text narrative at all within the Gospel, that was, the kind of sin that you don't want to be found guilty of. That is within the quote unquote church, simply because that takes away, so much passion. Because if Matthew didn't write Matthew, and if Mark didn't write Mark, and if Luke didn't write Luke, and if John didn't write John, then the spotlight is on Jesus. How can we really trust that Jesus actually said any of this? And I keep saying that
That's unbearable.
we have no reason to think that Jesus spoke as we see within the framework of the Gospels. But I'm not suggesting that Jesus wasn't this historical person. I certainly do not advocate the carriers or the prices of what's going on. These people are spinning something that is so fake, so unmeasured, so unscientific, and I don't get why people are even interested in that theme. They are doing more damage. That is, when it comes to an ethical approach to discipline, they are doing more damage than I can even suggest. But go ahead.
Kevin Skidmore says, church is also about community. I study and worship Jesus at home, then go to church for the fellowship. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. You know, there is a, I don't know, it was a miraculous moving of mountains to get so many people reading the same book for centuries after century after century, and that is perhaps the single biggest strength of the church, is to get everybody studying the same textbook for so long. It's certainly something that I envy and hope that we can find a way to supplement, replace, whatever word we're using there. I don't think replace is the word.
I just got a text, and it's from Mom. Yes, she misses being on the show. She's not here. She's there. Where is there? Well, she is with my grandson and my son and my daughter-in-law, and they are having fun at a place where fun is to be had. And so, honey, I miss you so much.
We're talking about the playground behind Little Caesars?
It's a little bit larger than that.
Okay.
A little bit larger than that. But they decided that that kind of community was better than First Baptist Church.
McDonald's has a pretty big playground.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to bring in, if we can, let's bring in Terrell. Terrell, hello.
Hello and good morning to all.
Well, good morning.
Thank you.
We were talking. Go ahead.
Just thinking about the subject this morning, and when it comes to church, I can identify with Joey. You know, there are certain things that at least you feel like you have. Now, I don't know how much substance might have been there actually in reality, or how much reality was there as far as relationship and that sort of thing. But I think I can sum up my experience to date by saying that I had surgery. I feel like I had surgery, and the kind of surgery I had was I had these rose-colored glasses surgically removed, and it's somewhat painful because as they come off, you begin to see things much differently, of course, and things get more complicated because when you're in a box of, this is it, just to stay within these limits and everything's good. That's all that matters. And then when you step out of that box, you find there's much more to it than that. But in one sense, it's scary. It's kind of you can kind of feel lost at times, but I think the reward is much greater than what you actually are walking away from, because there's so many limits that are removed. The limits to your thinking, to your just function, the way you approach the world and the people that you meet each and every day. And it's pretty hard to just, nail down, here's what happens, but I think that's the best way I could sum it up.
Let me ask this question in light of what we chatted about earlier. You were a part of a commune years ago, and so many people would disparage that type of living. My interest, that is, in teaching the Bible, that is to you, wasn't to get you to move from a communal setting into, let's say, a First Baptist church or a church with another name. My interest was to get you to rethink the construct of that narrative that is so tethered, so anchored in the past. In other words, it has one story and it's based upon an interpretation of something that we really can't get everything to really interpret it accurately, if, for lack of a better word here. And so after you move from, let's say, the commune to, let's say, a normal church life, now you're completely out of that norm and you've developed a different norm with much respect to all of the people that you've been surrounded by. You're simply saying it's much better to be out here, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing that I've noticed, and I guess this is what, let's see, I don't know how to put it. It's my biggest concern, you might say, goal in life, is to get past these, and I'll just use a term that we're familiar with on NCG, and that is isms. Whether it's actually Baptistism or atheism or even just a Lions Clubism or whiteism, blackism. It's not restricted any longer to just church. It's anything that separates, that divides us, that keeps us from focusing on what connects us and what we can do if we work together rather than just individually, just grouping up and saying, I belong to this, I belong to that. And if you don't belong to this, well, I might not hate you or I might not, treat you bad, but we're probably not going to have anything to do with each other. So you can see the extreme, from the one extreme being just hatred and possibly murderous tendencies, all the way to just you're there, but I don't really notice you. And it seems like as long as we have these things that we have to be loyal to above one another, then this is going to be an issue. And I would have never seen this had I not become disconnected from and untethered to the things I've been tethered to in the past.
That's good. Let's look at this from different vantage points, and perhaps Diana can add something to this conversation. Come on into the conversation, Diana. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Jones. How be you? And good
Marvelous,
morning,
wonderful.
Joey over there. Good to see your face. Yeah, you were talking about community, and I replied to Kevin. The community aspect of things is extremely, extremely important. And I think that's something that atheists miss. And I mean that in two senses. Number one, they feel they want it, but they don't think they have it. And number two, they lose sight of the point that it is necessary. Now, we have conventions, but it takes a good bit of cash to get to these. So a lot of us don't have that. And on the street, we're basically, just sitting in our apartments by ourselves. And yeah, it gets lonely. You miss the whole camaraderie that you can find in, say, the institutional church setting, or better yet, in what you're terming the ἐκκλησία.
Let me see if I can define something a little bit better. Many people in theology would take ἐκκλησία to mean the called out ones, simply because of the manner in which it is spelled. That's a very inarticulate argument. Some people would say, well, it was used, and it was, if someone was, if I serve someone with a summons, okay? If I summon, X, Y, or Z person to come to whatever. And so there's something about that attracts people, in that, oh, I was called out, I was summoned, I'm special. I think that sometimes we fail to see the good side of it. In other words, I'm not arguing that some of these renditions or renderings are good. I'm simply saying that some people feel as if they are not preferred or special. And there's something about someone getting up and ministering a sermon, whereas, oh, now you are special, not just to anyone, but you're special to the most awesome entity that ever was, God. And so you're the apple of God's eye. And so being special is where a lot of people want to go. They want to feel as if they are special. And religious people tend to understand that people want to feel special. Some people spin it in a theological sense. Other people in religion are not so tethered to the theology. They are more about community. And so I've got a question, since you know more than I do, much more than I do, about the atheist community. When I look at fundamentalism within the framework of the religious circle, let's picture the religious circle being huge. Fundamentalism represents only a small portion of that. Some atheists, not all atheists, but some atheists over here have created foundations like the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Everyone that I've had a conversation with from that foundation has been about, let's erase religion. Let's get rid of it. We don't need it any longer. And so the question would be, just as much as religious people, that is the sum, these fundies, within this huge religious framework are trying to get rid of all atheists by converting them and trying to get them to believe like they do, what's the difference between that mindset and atheists, that is some atheists within this framework, like the Freedom from Religion Foundation, trying to get everyone to get rid of their religion? Because it's obvious that within the framework, the religious community, there are some wonderful persons. There are some very smart people within that religious circle. Would you agree? Not all are
I'm looking
fundies.
at one of them right now.
I beg your pardon?
I'm looking at one of those very smart people right now.
Well, thank you. And so I don't get why people want to take religion away from me. I'm very religious.
That sucker, she wasn't talking about you just then.
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean you, Dr. Jones. You're up there too, Joey, so don't feel left out.
Boy, I jumped on that one.
That'd be so embarrassing.
I'm still
Good
coughing.
thing she was talking about you.
Okay, here's the deal. I don't get why fundies within the religious community are trying to get every atheist to think like they do. I don't get that. I don't like that. It bothers me when theists of any flavor try to convert others. That really is tragic. Around here, it's so common. I went to Lowe's and Home Depot yesterday. In front of both stores, we had these ministers of the gospel holding high their Bible. I mean, they reminded me of Trump in a sense. When he was talking about Ted Cruz, he holds the Bible high and then he lies. That was funny. But my point is, that same fundamentalist mindset of fundamentalism is in atheism, is it not?
It is to some extent, yes. There are a lot of atheists, I can think of a couple names right offhand, but I'll be nice, who would like to see all religion destroyed, not all religion, all looking toward the numinous, the transcendental, want to see all of that eliminated. And I think it's overreacting. The fundies are a big problem here in the U.S. I know that. I would like to see these folks begin to understand that not everybody is going to be like them. But then there are a lot of people that aren't like them that are very good people.
Right.
And, why throw out the baby with the bathwater? Now, I can understand your feeling about the FFRF because it does very often look like they want to wipe out all trace of religion. I mean, as far as I understand them, and I could be very wrong about this, they want inclusion, but if there's going to be no total inclusion, then leave it all out. So you've got those 2 points going there, and I know they seem to emphasize the 1 point, the leave it all out. Where am I going with this? But yeah, there are the factions within the atheist community who do want to get rid of things, and I want to see that change. There is a good bit of philosophy, a good bit of wisdom in that book we call the Bible, just as there is in the Bhagavad Gita or the Torah or, hell, even the Quran. Look for that rather than narrowing down on certain passages and using those to support your own bias.
Okay, let's talk about it in the context of popularity. Some of the most popular theists are evangelizing in the sense of trying to convert everyone over to their way of thinking, correct?
Yeah, I can think of a couple of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't it true that there are many popular atheists who are trying to destroy all religion? Some are even...
Yes, absolutely.
But let me finish my point here. Are they not trying to also... They're trying to suggest that no one have any form of faith? I mean, think about that. When you deal with all the many usages of faith, these people who are advocating science want to take a political species and say we can erase religion. And they want to blame all war on religion. But when you look at the science and you study monkeys, for instance, you're going to find that, wow, they have many more wars than human beings do. Is it because they're religious, or is it because they are ones that set boundaries? They become very involved in territory. Do you see where I'm going?
Oh, absolutely. And I am one to say that no, religion is not the base cause of warfare. Many people will use religion to justify their warfare, but they had other reasons to take up arms before they took up the book to justify it.
But I've even heard philosophers lately who are atheists who have, in a sense, talked about the Old Testament in a manner that's not true, and they've even claimed that that is their justification for atheism. So if you don't even understand, that is, through scientific method and practice, this abjad that we do have, and then you're trying to claim that this is my justification for atheism, I don't get that. And many people applaud that as a very measured response to the question of God. That is, in the name of atheism. I just don't get that. That is very much a turnoff to me. Just like people who, are phobic of Muslims. I think that some people are phobic of faith. They're phobic of, the terms. They're phobic of the book. They don't want to take the time to even read it. That is, in a comprehensive manner. And so I don't get why people on both sides, and this is why I'm prone to think that it would be better for me just to push away from theism and atheism and just suspend judgment, because I really don't see anything being done in the name of theism or atheism that works for me and my friends.
May I say something?
Yeah.
I think that the human race currently has a problem where most people hate themselves, don't you think? Like to some extent, they just don't know how to love themselves. It's a struggle that we're going through right now. Not only now, but for as far back as I can see, that there's a problem in the human condition of people hating themselves. And the problem with hating yourself is that when you hate yourself, you see the things in other people that you don't like. You tend to draw back and disconnect from other people, and what church did, and I can't speak for all religion, but what religion did was it sort of gave people a shortcut. Like, you don't have to spend the amount of time that you need to heal and forgive yourself and grow up and learn to love yourself so that you can then love others. You can actually, yes, you're worthy of being hated. But this guy over here, he's great. And so let's all focus our attention on him, and then we'll all have a reason to gather. And it's sort of like this medicine, this instant cure. And skeptical Jed pointed out that xenophobia is the big cause of war, and I think that that's a source of that. It takes time to get to a place to where you can just very easily embrace yourself and others, and then people who are so different from you, and we don't do that. We in the religious community, we focus on something else. We don't deal with our own problems. We put our sin on something else, and the side effect is that we just continue to hate other people and we go to war against them.
Okay, now we have one group.
I'm sorry. The reason why I brought that up was to say that I think that organizations like Freedom from Religion are being very naive about the effect it would have if we just ripped that what really is a legitimate kind of medication away from people. They do need something better, but if you just rip that away, all they're going to be left with is their own hatred for their own selves.
In other words, if you're going to ask someone to walk away from something, the question is, where are they going? What are they walking to? And so my point is this: we have two isms, theism and atheism in this sense. I would suggest agnosticism, which would be suspending judgment, but that's another show. But picture it like this. We have theism, and when contrasted with atheism, what you see happening within the name of atheism, you see people trying to disparage, that is, shame people because they have faith.
Right.
They do these kinds of things, and they want to say, well, yeah, I've seen this too many times in too many Facebook groups. Yeah, but the reason that we have wars, it's because of religion. We need to erase religion. And that seems to be the rhetoric that's with, so many different people within the framework of atheism. And my point is, if you have, let's say, one ism that advocates humanism and another that advocates the church, look at the one ism that advocates humanism. They should be able to see, if they're really interested in science, look at mimetic theory and theories that are closely associated with that kind of research. You're going to find that human beings tend to try to find scapegoats for various reasons. And so scapegoat-isms are out there. People are trying to make our president into a scapegoat. They're trying to make all kinds of, this is why we did Jesus that way. That is, human beings took Jesus. He's our scapegoat. And that's how, the doctrine of penal substitution came about. Now, when you read the fabric of the Greek text, it's not about penal substitution, but people read that into it because they want to make him the eternal scapegoat. And so theists, they're quite comfortable with Jesus taking care of all of our sins because he placed all of that stuff on himself. And so that works for them. Now, what are you going to replace it with? Let's do away with all of the stuff going on over here in the religious community. Because in the religious community, one thing that they're doing in a very powerful way, they're singing songs together. They're doing things to encourage laughter. They're doing things to encourage feeding the hungry. They're building more hospitals than not.
Ironically,
They're
a
doing
lot
so
of that
many
should
great
contribute
things.
to these people learning to love themselves.
Right.
Unfortunately, they live under a theology that teaches them that they're not worthy of love without the God that they're doing all this for.
But in a sense, what I'm saying is the doctrine of perfectionism should be put to the side. If you look at a theist, why try to convert that theist? Why not just try to say, can't you improve your game? In other words, if you believe X, Y, and Z that is within the text, can't you up the game there? Challenge Christians, that is, when it comes to their moral standards, okay?
Right.
You can go through the Old Testament, you can find that you have these paradigm shifts. You find that people were there, and now they are here. You ought to be saying to yourself, wow, that's good.
Yeah.
They're
You
not
can see
stuck
moral
on the-
outlines,
Right.
And then you can see this God not meeting those outlines. You can say to yourself, even by the standards of this text, I am better than what's happening here. And so either there's some sort of interpretation problem here, or as you say, I need to step up my game in terms of the narrative.
I think that philosophers have created a lot of the problems that we see in this social construct, that is the warring between the two isms or the great debate, simply because when you say that a theist is one who makes this particular claim, just do a little bit of research on your own and just go knocking on some doors and ask people, are you making a philosophical claim here, or what's going on? And most people are simply saying, I've experienced X, Y, and Z in my life,
Right.
and I'm finding stories that I can relate to, and so in a sense I'm conflating them for now because I don't have a good explanation for so many of the things that I'm experiencing. And so that's where people are in theism. Now you find a few fundamentalists, they will do like Cy ten Bruggencate and Eric Hovind. They boldly make these claims that philosophers are trying to talk about. But philosophers are, in a sense, they're talking about, like a small dot on the marker board rather than the all. And so when you start grouping and start broad stroking every theist with, all of you guys are making a claim, that's like saying all blacks are X. It becomes almost a racial, it becomes
Yeah,
much like
bigoted.
racism. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's bigoted. And so what say you to that, Diana?
About the separating into classes, I see a lot of folks here on this side of the fence doing that. It's almost a xenophobic thing from them. I'd like that to be dropped as soon as possible. I see it on both sides of the fence. I was just dealing with someone who had put up a video a year ago. I put up my response yesterday, and it was dripping with xenophobia. In particular, it was about the Catholic Church's stance on people like me. Why is it that people have to find the slightest differences and revile them? Would it not be so much better to see those differences and say, okay, what point are you making? What do you have to offer with that?
Right.
Right, that's good.
See it as a strength.
Now, I'm very much for the philosophers in that if you have a question, is there a God? Well, that's a good question. But when you put, let's say, a model together, let's say that a theist is one who claims that there is a God. Okay, that's fair. But to start broad stroking and say everyone, let's say, must be under that umbrella or this other umbrella, theists or the umbrella of theism or atheism, that's just well outside of the scope and sequence of where philosophers are. Would you agree with that, Diana?
Yeah, I mean, the philosophers, at least those who are making sense to me anyway, seem to have a broader look at the whole venue, whereas the others, the fundamentalists on either side, if you will, take that very, very, very narrow view and use that to justify whatever they want. And we're not going to get anywhere that way.
Okay, perhaps I'm not making myself clear. And,
Okay, yeah.
maybe you can help me here. I'm simply saying that philosophers, for the sake of just making sense out of the question would be, is there a God? Not, is there a God that exists,
Right.
but is there a God? Now, if your answer is yes, there is a God, if you're going to make that assertion, then you would be X, okay? If you're going to say no, you're going to say not X. And so that's what they are attempting to deal with. They're not trying to broad stroke everyone, but if you happen to fit within these particular categories that they've dealt with the question, that's what's happening. But the question still remains, can you take a different approach to the question other than just that particular approach? And the answer to that question is yes. And that's something that I would like to deal with on a subsequent show.
The approach being to say, is there a God outside of existence?
No, I'm simply saying, if I ask the question, is there a God?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I could say, well, if your answer is yes, and you're going to assert there is a God, or if you're going to assert there is not a God, we can look at that and say, yeah, that's how some people are responding to the question. Okay,
Right.
But
That's not the only two. That's not the
right.
only
And
two
so
ways to respond. To
some
the question.
people don't respond to that question like that. Some people do this. Is there a God? What is God?
Right. Yeah.
So if you're going to ask me, the question, is there a God? I'm going to ask you the question, what is God? Now, you can go to the book that we call the Bible, or you can go to another holy book or whatever. And I really don't think that any of these books contain an articulate definition of God. These are more in the context of poetry. And so I'm not going to disparage a lot of poets. I don't see any usefulness in that. And so if I go to a poets convention and I get really dogmatic in a literal sense, perhaps someone's going to be laughing at me.
I mean, I believe in God in many senses of the word, and
But people don't know what you mean.
I don't know
by
if the
that.
word "many" is the right word there, but in several senses, I believe in God, and if somebody were to take me to task about those senses, I don't think they would succeed in proving me wrong. You take the staunchest atheist. I've had some conversations with atheists in which I've demonstrated the existence of a God, and I was simply told that I was cheating. That was the best that they could do.
Let me ask you a couple of questions, just to put you on the spot. Okay, I'm going to play the person who asks questions, and I'm actually going to ask you a question. What is God? Define God well. That is, when you say you
Right.
believe in God, what does that mean?
Well, one definition that I accept, and I think is broadly acceptable, is a conscious and willful creator, something from which either this earth came from, or this universe, or any form of life.
So you're defining God within existence or outside of what we call existence?
It could be either.
Could be either.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, within that definition, I'm not specifying, nor am I specifying whether that God is eternal.
Okay.
Just simply our. It could be our origin. I can speak to the existence of a God from which our origins came. I can speak to the issue of a God in this sense from which simply life came. I can speak sense from which society and culture came, and it's actually, in my mind, it's a little disturbing when you get into these concepts, because you have to face some realities of what our culture is made of, what our world is made of, how it came about, and how it can be destroyed. And there is a sense of a God in all of this.
If someone were to ask you, upon what basis do you form that belief, what would your response be?
Well, I'm not a professional philosopher.
I'm not trying to get you
yeah.
into that vein. I'm simply saying that.
And I'm not a professional theologian, but where I derive my conclusions there, and again, to emphasize, I'm a member of NCG Studios, so I'm not settled on these conclusions, but the process has led me to this place through just observing what I perceive to be reality. I'm not reading any piece of literature and saying, oh, it says this, therefore it must be true. I'm just looking at the effects of culture around us. I'm looking at our current ideas of how we came about from a scientific standpoint. And I don't know. I mean, I don't really know how to speak to this without really getting in depth into it. And I'm trying to tease it, but you're trying to pull it out of me. I could start, but it'll probably take me at least 30 minutes to explain myself.
Perhaps we need to do that
Yeah,
later
yeah.
on today. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go for it, Diane.
There's the question that I have when you're talking about, is there a God? Does God exist? I'm going to be the first to admit that I am having a very large problem reconciling those two questions. Sometimes I think I get it, and then I find out that I don't. For example, if one were to ask, is there a bottle of nail polish? And the answer is yes. Well, I'll look around and, oh, look, here on my desk, there it is. But if it's not there, then I would expect to find it at Walmart or at Target or, at some other store.
What
That's
if I
all
s-
tied together with that question of, does that bottle of nail polish exist? And you
Right.
seem to be indicating that there is a difference between the two.
Well, I think there is
I don't get it yet, so
Okay,
can you help me along?
sure. Let's say this is existence. Are you with me?
Oh, the ball. I love the ball.
Okay.
I
Now-
love that metaphor. I really do.
This is what you can do with the ball. You can squeeze it. You can do all kinds of things with it. Now, just for the sake of argument, let's say that this is existence. And let's say, and I can't hold up something and say that this is not existence. I'm simply saying that theologians have suggested this. If you take away the ball, that is existence, they will say there is a God, and we don't know how to put it in any. If I say that I speak from anthropomorphisms are in the conversation because I'm a human being. I don't know how to articulate it outside of that narrative, and you would agree with that. And so when it comes to existence, it's really hard for me to talk about something that might be, and I don't even want to use the word be because that would, some people would say, well, lexically you're insisting that there's something that exists. And so when theologians are dealing with a question, and even if they bring up the word existence, if they say there is a God, but there isn't a God that exists, what they're saying that if there is existence to God, it's not like the existence which is the ball. And so, yes, they are equivocating. Does that make sense? And so what they're saying is that you have God, and then you have God who created existence. And God created existence to evolve, because existence, we have no model that would suggest that it's always been. Do we have any model that suggests that existence is eternal. That is in the theological sense. Do you see where I'm coming from? And so what theologians have done for years, they're not trying to pitch God exists. They're simply saying that when it comes to the origin, that is, of existence, before this came into existence, that God brought this into existence. Now, whether you want to call it creation or not is secondary to the point. Does that make sense, Diana?
Okay, let's see if I can reframe this and see if I get it.
Let me make one more statement. Let's look at it like this. They would argue that God is A, existence is B. None of B is A, none of A is B.
So when you're holding up the ball, are you making that a metaphor to the universe that we can understand and interact with it? And then when you say existence, do you mean that it's somewhere within that ball that we can reach?
Okay, all of the theories of existence, okay? All of the theories of existence are found within the framework of this ball, okay? That we know. And then a theologian would say, even beyond that which we would know, models of existence that would maybe come in time or maybe viewed from, let's say, a different vantage point from another species or whatever, all that exists would be within this framework. Now, this is B, but none of B is God. Now, God being, you can't point to where, but God brought this about, created it. And that's what theologians are suggesting. Theologians are not saying, oh, God exists, and out of his existence, he somehow brought this into existence. That's not what they're saying. And what I'm pitching to you is something that has been held by theologians for a long, long time. Most theologians rest on that argument. And what's amazing, you haven't been an atheist for 2 or 3 months. You've been an atheist for a long, long time. You've listened to a lot of intelligent atheists speak, and they are very articulate. But you've never heard one give an articulate argument. That is, how they would go about, that is, through scientific method and practice, suggesting that there is no God which brought about this origin of this. Because evolution is about how things change over time, correct? It really doesn't have an answer to origin.
Exactly, and that's what a lot of creationists, fundamentalists of whatever religious stripe creationists miss, that something had to, some life already had to exist before we can even talk about evolution. So it's not addressing origin at all.
Okay, but when you're talking to a fundy, they're going to throw the word exist in there, and that's unfortunate. That's not where theologians are, and I'm not making my argument here. I'm simply saying this is where most theologians are. Theologians are careful, and if they ever use existence when it comes to God, they are intentionally equivocating, simply because they don't have a better word.
I don't know why you, maybe it's just not within your wheelhouse it just doesn't please you to speak about it in these terms. But to me, many atheists entertain the simulation theory, the idea that we are in a simulation. They at least entertain that.
I get that.
Yeah, and if you phrase this as that which is simulated, and you understand that the players within this simulation, there is no chance of them reaching beyond the simulation because they are the essence of the simulation. They're just not going to step out of it. And so a simulation implies a simulator, but the one who simulated did not create a simulation around her or him or it. It created the simulation, and it is outside of the simulation. Now, I stray from the word exist, but if you replace the idea of existence with that which is simulated, and you say the simulator who exists does not exist within the simulation, then now perhaps we can get back to the idea of the word existence and say the quote-unquote God who brought about existence is not within existence itself.
Okay, Karl Barth made that
Bingo,
argument.
Joey. I think you've got where I'm coming from. We won't use the same words about that, but yeah, I think you've got it.
Yeah, well, existence is just a word, and we're really struggling to get at what's being meant here. But existence doesn't have to equate with all that is. Especially when we're speaking within the idea of a God.
Okay,
quote unquote.
but there's a reason why I choose the word existence.
Sure,
Simply because in the great debate,
it comes from theological arguments.
well, I would argue that the existence
Or philosophical arguments.
is coming more from atheists than from theologians.
Got it.
Okay? Because theologians are not just resting on existence theories. Okay? And
Yeah.
so they work well outside of those particular axes.
Yeah. Theologians
So-
don't need no existence. They're good without it. Yeah.
We don't need no stinking existence.
We need not be down them. I don't know how to say that. Oh boy. Okay, we are well out of time, but Daryl, jump in the conversation. I wish you would have jumped in earlier.
Well, I did want to go back to something that we were talking about earlier. I think it's important to point out, I was fit into probably several categories of Christianity throughout my Christian days, but the whole time I was in it, there was this nagging notion that we are actually a big part of the command, the demand of being a Christian was converting others. I mean, this is huge. This is something that's kind of the backbone of Christianity. So, to find people trying to convert from the standpoint of Christianity should be expected. But in my own experience, I think everybody wants to be comfortable in their skin. They want to feel good about what they go out and do each and every day. And this was something I never could get comfortable with. And I felt a lot of maybe not quite condemnation, maybe sometimes condemnation, maybe other times just disappointment in myself because I wouldn't go out and try to convert people. I never was any good at that. To the point to where when I was introduced to the idea of Calvinism, it made it much easier. Just go out and say something about the cross and Jesus dying, and that's it. And then if they can hear that and believe it, then they're sheep, and that's up to God, not me. But these days, I'm fine with just sharing the good things I've experienced, relating them to people, and just saying, it's in your lap. I don't feel the need to get people thinking like I do or trying to get them to be like me. But many things I feel like I've discovered, I've realized along the way that I feel like are very significant. They work well for me. So I'm very willing to share these things and just leave it up to the individual to see the value or not, And, I'll put it this way: if atheism or any other idea is right and it's good and it's the way we should all go, then it doesn't need to be forced. We don't need to make converts. Just lay the ideas out there, and they'll take hold if they're good. If they're worth having, then I think people will gravitate that direction.
You've had the final say. We're out of here. We're out of time. We are getting ready to do a show called Reflections. Yes. Bye-bye.
Take care.